We now bring in CBS Sports MLB writer Matt Snyder following an array of pitching performances on Wednesday night, from good to not so good. And Matt, we've got to start with possibly the biggest news from the day, and that's coming from the Mets camp. It's almost as if this team is beginning to spiral at this point. I mean, after Jorge Lopez threw his glove into the stands as he left the field, and then after clarification saying he's the worst teammate on the worst team in the majors, designated for assignment. Matt, have you ever seen a situation unfold like this during your time covering baseball? Because this seems pretty crazy.
I thought of Carlos Zambrano with the Cubs, maybe 2011 or something. There was like supposedly an altercation in the tunnel, and he said, "We stink," and he ended up getting designated for assignment by the Cubs. That was going to be the end of the road anyway for him. That is the only other thing that comes to mind in baseball. Now, we've seen manager tirades and stuff, right? And managers going off, you know, in the clubhouse or what have you. But I'm sure there are more, but it is rare. You know, it's you don't often see that. And it did. I went back and watched it. At first, it sounds like he said team, but if you go back and watch, there's a little more there. And I did think he said teammate in all the majors. And you know, he's right to clarify. Although I guess somebody asked him to clarify, and he said, "Let's just go with both." So the worst player on the worst team. But the Mets are not the worst team in baseball. The White Sox are easily the worst team in baseball, and the Marlins and Rockies have been worse all year. But it's still a really bad situation. I mean, they at one point won 12 out of 15 games early in the season, and it looked like they might be respectable. But then the offense fell apart. Edwin Diaz fell apart. Francisco Lindor should be better. Jeff McNeil's been awful. Pete Alonso's rocking that low average again. He should be hitting for more average. Kodai Senga's been hurt all year, and he keeps having setbacks. It's a bad situation, especially because they weren't expected to be this bad this quickly, and they're only 2 years removed from winning 100 games. And then you talk about it, they're not the worst team in the majors, but I mean, their season still has kind of been a disaster so far. We get the news of Edwin Diaz heading to the 15-day IL due to right shoulder impingement, and then Pete Alonso left Wednesday's game in the bottom of the first after being hit in the hand as he tried to check swing on a pitch. It's kind of like one of those situations where they say when it rains, it pours. But Matt, where does this organization go from here? Well, first off, on your first point, this definitely feels like rock bottom, right? Like they'd already been playing poorly, but in the same day, you get a player saying he's the worst teammate in all of Major League Baseball. Then you have the Edwin Diaz hitting the injured list. You have the Pete Alonso getting hurt on top of everything else. Like things couldn't have gone much worse in one day. So it's where do they go from here? Was the second part of that? They're sellers in front of the trade deadline, and this is David Stern's chance to put his stamp on the organization. He was brought in here to rebuild this thing in the right way. You know, he came from the Brewers. They have payroll restrictions there. The Mets won't eventually. Under this ownership group, they will not have payroll restrictions eventually, and we've seen them spend really heavily in the past couple of years. So they're going to break them all down. They're going to build them back up, and then they're going to sign a lot of free agents once it's built back up. Part of the teardown right now, it looks like Luis Severino is going to be a good guy to move in July. Sean Manaea is probably going to be a good one. JD Martinez is on a one-year deal. He'll be a good one. Pete Alonso, he hits free agency after the year. I know it seems like he's wanted to be a Met. Doesn't seem like David Stearns has really wanted to sign him to a long-term extension. So Alonso could be a big name that goes. And then maybe Starling Marte. He's signed through next year at just over $20 million next year. But if there's a buyer who wants him bad enough, the Mets will fray half of that salary. Maybe Starling Marte will go as well. What a difference that 2 seasons can make. Definitely will be eyeing the Mets as we inch closer and closer to that trade deadline. But let's head over to the NL Central. Maybe another not so great showing. Shota Imanaga had by far maybe his worst outing of the season with the Cubbies. And to put things into perspective, Imanaga gave up 8 hits, 7 earned, and just 1 strikeout on the day in the Cubs' eventual game. But this one on the heels of owning that sub-1 ERA prior to Wednesday's game. Did you expect this run to even last this long? And what can he take away from this outing against Milwaukee? No, I definitely think it was. I did not think it was going to last this long. I mean, it was 9 starts. He had a 3.0 WAR, which is just outrageous for only 9 starts. A 0.84 ERA. The Cubs were 8-1 in his 9 starts and barely. Well, they are 500 exactly right now, and they've overall been 8-2 in his starts now with this loss. So it shows how amazing he has been in his first foray into Major League Baseball as a veteran from Japan's Nippon Professional Baseball. We talked about earlier. He'd given up a lot of fly balls in his career, and there were some concerns that when he came over here, a lot of those fly balls would be home runs. And sure enough, that's what happened tonight. It hadn't happened all year up until this point, but it happened tonight. He was striking out a lot more guys than a lot of people thought he would. So it's kind of like it all caught up with him and just came crashing down in just one outing. I would not expect this to carry on moving forward. I think there was a course correction due, and it kind of corrected itself here. I think he's still going to be a very valuable pitcher for the Cubs. It was just one really terrible outing.
Yeah, absolutely. A bounce back moment, if you will, an opportunity to kind of maybe a humbling moment. But from not so great, but let's talk about the positives now. A better outing for Pirates rookie Paul Skenes, who put together yet another stellar performance, striking out 9 while also pitching a scoreless third before striking out the side in the 4th in the Pirates' eventual win over the Tigers. And he's doing this on his 22nd birthday. I'd like to call it some B-Day Ks, but this is just his 4th start of the year, so there's a limited sample size. But what have you made of his early start to the season, and what do you make maybe of his trajectory at this point in a very, very young career?
Well, when you talk about a rookie, you're going to have some inconsistencies. And in his first outing, we talked several times that day about how inefficient he was, and he wasn't able to get through the 5th inning at all. Second time out, he was lights out, as good as anybody's looked all year. Third time out, he only struck out 3 against the Giants in 6 innings, and that's very low for him and a guy with his stuff. He comes out today, and he's amazing again. His numbers overall are all-star numbers, obviously in a small sample of 4 starts. He might not have enough starts to make the all-star team this year, but he just looks like an all-star. If you watch the way he goes about his business and the stuff he has and how dumb he makes the other hitters look, frankly, that's an all-star. And another thing that I wanted to latch onto from today is when I went and interviewed him at AAA Indianapolis in April, he was just starting to get used to the sinker as his 3rd pitch. And some people are identifying it as a split-finger fastball. Some people are calling it a splinker. But when I asked him, what's that 3rd pitch that you've been using, he said, it's just a sinker, but you can call it whatever you want. Well, I want to call it a sinker because that's what it is. But today, at the time, he said, I haven't used it that much, but it feels good. Today, he threw 39 sinkers compared to 33 four-seam fastballs. So now, at the time in AAA, he said, I'm not using it that much, but it feels good. Now, that's the most frequent pitch he used today, and he's very effective with it. I believe he got 12 swings and misses with it today. So to have him enter a new pitch into his arsenal and already be that comfortable with it speaks to the kind of talent he has. You're looking at probably a multi-time future All-Star and maybe a future Cy Young winner. Perhaps
Pittsburgh has a future All-Star on their hands, and like you mentioned, potentially down the line, maybe, could be, maybe a future Cy Young winner on their hands. Okay, another young gun on the radar, Braves top pitching prospect and college two-way star Spencer Schwallenbach made his major league debut on Wednesday, and it was a bit of a mixed outing. He lasted 5 innings, giving up 5 hits, 3 earned, but did have 5 strikeouts on the day. And Matt, they're certainly going to need the most out of their young talent as they move ahead without Spencer Strider and then also Ronald Acuna Jr. But just considering the key injuries that Atlanta is dealing with, what is your current outlook on the Braves as we sit at that first third mark of the season?
They still have a lot of talent. They still have a lot of guys who haven't been playing to that level of talent. Obviously, they're not going to get Ronald Acuna back to make good on his level of talent because he was one of the guys who was underachieving to this point. But they still have enough talent there. They will need something from Schwellenbach. And really, today, he did give up some hard contact, but he had 4 scoreless innings before giving up a 3-run bomb in the 5th. And that was Delane Thomas with 28 home runs last year. So it was a pretty good outing through 4 innings. Like you said, 5 strikeouts. He missed a lot of bats. They're going to need him. I mean, it's only 2 starts in Double-A, so that's a major fast track to the bigs. But with Spencer Strider having gone down, Charlie Morton being way up there in years, Reynaldo Lopez, you don't know how long he's going to be able to remain in the rotation as long as he stays healthy. Chris Sale, again, Sale's been very good for the most part, but you don't know if you can count on his health for a full season. So they're going to need something from some other guys. Bryce Elder's going to have to get up in the mix. Schwellenbach, I think, showed enough today to give him another start, even if it's a little bit down the road, even if it's not his next turn in the rotation. But I wouldn't be surprised if they stuck with him for another term, because it was, like I said, one swing of the bat is what kind of did him in, and it was still 3 runs in 5 innings in his first foray in the majors when he only had 2 Double-A starts.
Again, like you said, and building off of that, Atlanta certainly needing some assistance in whatever capacity that comes, especially being without that 2023 NL MVP. Matt Snyder, appreciate you stopping by. Thanks so much.